We're talking about that other kind of fear, the kind that burrows deep, the kind that makes you question the very ground under your feet. Have you ever been driving, minding your own business, and taken a wrong turn? A turn that feels less like an accident and more like an invitation. If you have, you know that quiet dread that settles in. Now, imagine that feeling amplified 1,000 times over. Before we dive headfirst into this, if you're feeling that chill creeping up your spine already, do me a favor, hit that like button. Seriously, it helps tell the algorithms that you're into this kind of content, and it helps me bring you more. Subscribe if you haven't already, and for real, leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in the middle of nowhere? I read every single one. Okay, ready? Because once we start, there's no turning back. Hudson considered himself a quintessential Bostonian. He loved the brick, the history, the comforting thrum of city life. He was a creature of routine, of bustling streets and familiar faces. So, when an old, distant relative greeted, he'd never even known he had passed away and left him a small dilapidated property, he saw it as nothing more than an inconvenient inheritance, a quick fixer-upper and flip. The property, according to the legal documents, was located just outside the official limits of Greater Boston, in a place so remote it barely registered on modern GPS systems. A place called Blackwood Hollow. Blackwood Hollow, Hudson muttered to his reflection one crisp autumn morning, a sarcastic curl to his lip. Sounds like something out of a bad horror movie. He packed a small bag, mostly snacks, and a few tools, expecting a quick assessment trip. Get in, survey the mess, get out, easy. The drive started normally enough. The familiar cityscape dissolved into highways, then into state roads, and finally into something else entirely. The asphalt began to crack, shedding its modern skin for rougher, older tar. Trees, once neatly lined, grew wild and tangled, forming an oppressive canopy that devoured the sunlight. His phone signal, a constant companion in the city, flickered, then died. The GPS, too, sputtered, displaying a blank grid where roads should have been. Hudson felt a prickle of unease. This was beyond rural. This was forgotten. He found Blackwood Hollow not by a sign, but by the sudden, unsettling hush that fell. Over the world, the air grew heavy, still. The few houses he passed were ancient things, leaning into themselves, their windows like vacant eyes. No cars, no people, just a profound, suffocating silence. He slowed to a crawl, navigating by instinct. The legal description of the property echoing in his mind, last dwelling on Old Mill Road, past the abandoned gristmill. The gristmill was a skeletal ruin, its wheel long gone, its timbers rotting like bone. And beyond it, nestled beneath a knot of gnarled, impossibly dark trees, sat the house. It wasn't just old, it was ancient, like it had grown out of the earth itself, rather than built upon it. Paint peeled in leprous flakes, the porch sagged, and the roof looked ready to collapse. A shiver, unrelated to the crisp air, traced its way down Hudson's spine. "Right," he said aloud, his voice sounding thin and reedy in the overwhelming quiet. "Let's get this over with." He pushed open the creaking gate, stepping onto the property. The leaves underfoot were unnervingly dry, crunching with an exaggerated loudness. The front door was unlocked, a heavy plank of oak that swung inward with a groan that seemed to come from the house's very core. Inside, the air was cold, thick with the smell of dust, damp, and something else. something faintly metallic, like old blood or rust. Sunlight struggled through grimy windows, painting weak stripes across the floorboards. Everything was covered in a thick layer of grime, but beneath it, Hudson could see the outlines of old, sturdy furniture shrouded in white sheets. It felt less like a house and more like a tomb. He cautiously explored the ground floor. A living room, a dining room, a kitchen, all draped, eerily still. He climbed the stairs, each step a protest against his weight. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. One of the bedrooms, presumably his great-aunt's, was different. No sheet over the bed, just a thin, threadbare quilt. On the bedside table, a single, flickering candle and a small leather-bound journal. Curiosity, a dangerous companion in places like this, urged him forward. He picked up the journal. The pages were brittle, the script faded, but legible. It was his great-aunt's, dated decades ago. Her entries were disjointed, rambling. They spoke of the whispers in the woods, of the pull of the earth, and of the old ways. Then, a specific phrase caught his eye, repeated over and over. They watch, they always watch, and the offering must be made. A sudden bang from downstairs made Hudson jump, dropping the journal. His heart hammered against his ribs. He froze, straining his ears, but there was nothing now but the oppressive silence. Just the house settling, he told himself, trying to calm his racing pulse. He continued, reading, fascinated despite his growing dread. The entries grew more erratic, more desperate. She wrote of strange figures in the periphery, of things moving just beyond the edge of sight. And then, a series of crude, disturbing sketches, stick figures with elongated limbs, faceless, performing what looked like a dance. And beneath them, a symbol, a jagged, incomplete circle with 3 lines radiating outwards, like claws. A chill, deeper than before, enveloped him. He looked up, his eyes darting to the window. Through the grimy pane, he saw it, or thought he did. A flicker of movement at the edge of the dense, dark woods surrounding the house. A tall, impossibly thin shadow, just for a moment, against the gloom. He blinked, but it was gone. He clutched the journal. His logical mind screamed hallucination, paranoia. But the primal part of his brain, the one that screamed run, was winning. He needed to get out. Now he sprinted down the stairs, adrenaline surging. He burst through the front door, gasping for breath, the metallic smell stronger now. He fumbled with his car keys, plunging them into the ignition. Nothing. He tried again, and again. The engine remained stubbornly, terrifyingly silent. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He tried his phone, hoping against hope. Still no signal. He was trapped. As dusk began to paint the sky with bruised purples and blood oranges, the whispers started. They weren't in his head. They were real, faint at first, carried on the wind, rustling through the leaves of the ancient trees. They were low, guttural, unintelligible, yet somehow profoundly menacing. The air grew colder, heavy with a silent expectation. He peered into the encroaching darkness. This time, he didn't just see a flicker. He saw them, dozens of them, standing in the woods just beyond the tree line, barely visible against the deepening shadows. Tall, gaunt figures, utterly still. He couldn't make out faces, just the impression of dark, elongated forms. They were watching him. The entry from the journal echoed in his mind. They watch, they always watch, and the offering must be made. He scrambled back inside, slamming the heavy door shut, fumbling for the lock. He barricaded it with an old, heavy chest, his hands shaking so violently he could barely move. He grabbed the journal, frantically flipping through the last few pages. The final entry, scrawled in a frantic hand, was dated the day before she died. "They are here. They are waiting. The ritual. The land demands its due. I cannot fight it. Anymore, I cannot." The entry ended abruptly, and beneath it, not her handwriting, but that same jagged, claw-like symbol, crudely etched into the page, fresh and dark. The whispers outside grew louder, no longer just a murmur, but a chorus, rising in a discordant, alien chant. Something scraped against the side of the house, a long, dragging sound. Then, a slow, deliberate tap against the window pane. Hudson pressed himself against the wall, his breath catching in his throat. He could feel it now, the presence. Something ancient, hungry, had woken. And it wasn't just watching him anymore. It was coming for him. The darkness outside the windows was no longer just the night. It was teeming with shapes, with eyes he couldn't see but could feel burning into him. He heard the faint, telltale thump of something heavy landing on the roof, and then the unmistakable sound of something dragging itself across the old, creaking timbers above his head. He closed his eyes, squeezing them shut. He just wanted to be back in Boston, in his noisy, bustling apartment, where the only thing to fear was a late bill or a rude cab driver. But the silence that followed the scraping on the roof was worse than any noise. It was the silence of a predator waiting. Hudson was found 3 days later, wandering aimlessly on the outskirts of Boston, disoriented and babbling. He was dehydrated, covered in scratches, and his eyes held a vacant, faraway look. He spoke of the house, of the shadows, in the woods, of the whispers. But mostly, he spoke of the symbol, the jagged claw, which he'd somehow managed to carve into his own forearm, deep and angry. The house in Blackwood Hollow was never found again, or so the local authorities claimed. They said it was a delusion, a trauma-induced hallucination. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the old, forgotten parts of Massachusetts, you can hear it. A faint, low whisper carried on the air, asking, "Who's next?"